Okay, now put your name, put that information in the chat, please. Everybody ready for Thanksgiving? No, Jacqueline, no, no, I agree. Actually, I did a Thanksgiving about a week and a half ago with my kids because I was in town and could see them. So I kind of did Thanksgiving already. Doesn't feel like it, but okay, we'll wait a couple more minutes, see who else is going to come, and then we'll get going. Everybody have their study guides out? Grab your study guides because that's what we're going to review. And then Jamil and Kimberly, could you turn your cameras on, please? Hi, Kimberly. Hi, Jamil. Esther. Hi.
Yes. Hello.
How are
Yes.
you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Good, thank you. Thank you for asking. Hi, Martha? If you guys, the rest of you, put your name and your campus and your professor in the chat, that would be great.
Is it the end of the world if we forgot to put our campus, but we put our instructor?
No, it's not the end of the world.
Okay, sorry. I had already done it before you said campus.
No, just, that's, yeah. Your name and your instructor would be fine.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Jamil, are you there?
Hello.
Hey, can you turn your camera on, please? Thank you. Martha? Is it Martha? Martha. Hi. Well, thanks you guys for coming. My internet connection is unstable. Okay. That just popped up for me. Okay, let's
Professor?
get, yes.
I'm sorry. My camera is on, but I'm in work, so it might be actually on and off sometimes, if that's okay.
Okay. Yep. Okay.
Thank you.
Yep, this is for you guys, right? So thanks you guys for coming. We're kind of in the home stretch here. This is exam 3, right? Everybody have their study guide out. There's several reviews this week. I think I'm the first one to go. But I do my exam reviews from the study guide. I know others like to do PowerPoints and Cahoots and all that. I do my reviews right from the study guide. All right, because that's the way I do it. So couple things I want to do before I get, there's one thing I want to do before I get to the study guide and go through a tool that I use with students when I'm doing tutoring sessions or review exams or just talking about strategies. Hi, Sydney. How are you? Sydney and Yancey, if you guys could put Professor and Jacqueline, what else are we doing? Teach
Name and professor.
Thank you. Thank you. Put that in the chat. That'd be great. Okay, so this is interactive. Okay, this is for you guys. Okay, so I need you to I don't care if you want to stay unmuted or mute and come off mute, but this is for you. So I need you to jump in and ask questions if you need clarification on anything. Okay. So let me share my screen here. And this is the first, I want to go over this with you. This is what I use with my students. Okay. So we go through and we do our analysis. As far as exam review and action plan, we go through, was it a lack of knowledge? Was it test anxiety? Was it testing skills? Okay, so that's what I do with the students one-on-one, but this is the part I want to review with you. So here's some suggestions for exam performance. Some of these may apply to you, some may not, but these are good strategies to take into account. Okay, and I'm just going to go over a couple of them that I always point out. You should always be taking good notes during class. Okay, if you have your study guide available, pull your study guide out during class and take notes on that. Okay, because each section of the study guide is covered. I don't know if you guys do your NCLEX questions on a weekly basis, have kind of a, I do 50 per week, I do 100 per week, but you always have, you have access to all the NCLEX questions. Okay, you should have your NCLEX review books, right? So you should be practicing a certain amount of questions every week. And if you have issues with time management during the exam, you should be maybe pulling 50 questions from NCLEX and timing yourself. Do your own exam, time yourself. It should be about 1.5 minutes per question. Okay, so that's always good practice. And then terminology. If you're hung up on terminology in the study guide, you know, where do you go? Where do you go look up terminology? And don't say Google.
At the end of the book, the glossary.
Or at the beginning of each chapter in the book, right? Right? At the beginning of each chapter, it has a chapter outline, which is usually your PowerPoint, your summary, but right below that, it has a whole list of important terms that are going to come out of that chapter, right? And they're all hyperlinked. So if you just click on the word, it will take you to the part of the chapter that gives you what that word means. So if you're going, as you're going through the study guide, if there are certain words that you don't know, you have to go back and do your due diligence and look that word up. Okay. Let's see. Then attend live review sessions, which you're already doing because you're here. And then you can always schedule one-on-ones with your instructor, right? Everybody should have offered that to you. And those one-on-ones are just not for exam reviews, right? So they're for tutoring ahead of exams. You know, I meet with a lot of students ahead of exams that go through their study guide and they highlight some areas that they just can't get. And they want to meet with me before the exam to go through that. I do that all the time. So reach out to your instructor prior to exams with concepts that you're not understanding. Okay. Now we're only in Wednesday of your exams are next week, right? Wait, next week is 9. Yeah. So you still have time to meet with your instructors. Okay. I don't know what days of the week you guys have class, but as you're preparing for this exam and there's still some things that you're not getting, send an email to your instructor today or over the weekend. Hey, I want to meet with you before the exam. There's certain parts that I'm not getting. Okay. So exam test taking skills. So read each question carefully, focus on keywords. Tell me what some keywords are that you're looking for. What do you look for in the questions?
Most
Priority
important.
or first or most important.
Initially,
Yep. Best, what's the best answer? What's the most important answer? What's the priority answer? So if you get to a question and all the answers look correct and you don't know what to choose, go back and reread the question because maybe it asked you, what's the first thing? What's the most important thing? Right? That's a good key. If all the answers look correct and you're confused, you probably missed something in the question. Right? The other thing is make sure you can, I've had during my exam 2 review, I had a lot of students miss questions that were asked. You know, you have a positive question, you have a negative question. Give me an example of a negative question. It's asked in a negative way. What's an example of that?
The patient needs more teaching.
Okay. Okay, so if we expand on that, let's think of a negative question around teaching. You're observing a nurse doing discharge teaching. What is she telling the patient that you know requires more information from her, or more education from that nurse, right? So she's telling the patient something that's probably incorrect. Does that make sense? There's a big difference. Okay, and you've got to be able to identify those questions that are asked that way. You're working with a family in the community that is a smoking home. Okay, and they have younger kids with asthma. What does the client say to you that is concerning? Or what does the client say to you that you know requires more information? Does that make
I smoke
sense?
in the house all the time. Mhm.
Does that make sense? So it's asking what the wrong answer is. Does that make sense? So a lot of you guys, not you guys specifically, I don't know, but for my students, they miss those negatively asked questions. Sydney, you're shaking your head. I know you know I've gone over this in class a lot. Don't change your answers. I don't know if anybody is an answer changer, but no. Unless you can concretely convince yourself that the answer is wrong, like you have to be able, it's not, oh, I think I remember her saying that in class. I think I remember reading that. I think. That's not a good enough reason to change your answer. You have to really be able to have a concrete reason why you're changing your answer. All right. Don't change your answer unless you know why the first answer is wrong. Never change the answer because you feel uncertain. And there's your NCLEX questions. Review those. I met with a student yesterday that had time issues. She timed out. She missed like 4 questions. So part of her strategy was going to be going back and doing a couple of sets of 50 questions, timing herself to 1.5 minutes per question, and getting used to that. Does that make sense? So that was her strategy. Slow down when reading a question. All right. I always think it's a good idea to maybe cover the answers or don't read the answers yet. Read the question, see if you can come up with an answer in your head or on scrap paper, and then go look at the answers and see if something applies. So try and answer it in your head first. Okay. Focus on keywords. Write those keywords down. So if you read a question the first time and you see the word first or priority or greatest, write that down on your scratch paper. And then go back and read the question a second time to make sure you didn't miss anything else. Excuse me. Okay. And then test it and exam anxiety. All right. You need to be able to feel confident and prepared going into this exam. Okay. You can't think logically, positive self-talk. I know this. Okay. Here's the other one. Don't spend too long on a difficult question. Read that question twice. If you still have no clue, make an educated guess and move on. It's only one question. Okay. Do not sit with a question for 5-7 minutes. If you don't know it, you don't know it. Okay. If you sit and read that question over and over again, anxiety, lack of confidence, all that starts to set in. Okay, right down here, read it carefully 2 times, guess and move on to the easier questions. Okay? So those are my strategies that I review with students all the time. Does anybody in this group have any strategies other than these that they use that they could share with everybody else? What works for you?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, I use the you know, the little, like when you have the answers and stuff, on the very end of the answers, there's that little eyeball. If you click on that eyeball, it crosses out the answers that you're
Oh,
leaving out. Yeah, so you don't think about that anymore. You're just focusing on like the two.
so when you eliminate answers right off the bat, you cross them out.
Yeah, because then
Oh,
you don't have to think about it. Like that little I didn't know it was there. My friend told me.
did you
But you
guys
use
know
that
that? Did
use
everybody
that
know
little
that?
eyeball. Yeah, the little eyeball just puts a line
Yeah,
through
it
it,
has a
crosses
little
it
eye
out.
at the end of each answer. It has a little eye.
Yes, and then like I'll use the
Wow.
highlighter
Uh-huh.
and I'll highlight something that says priority or needs more teaching, because sometimes you get confused between needs more
Positive and negative.
teaching. Yeah, so I use the highlighter for that too. Those specific
That's
words.
really good. I didn't even know. I knew the highlighter was available, but I didn't know you could cross out answers. Did you guys know that? That's a really good strategy. I'm gonna write that down for for up. And you know, I say that you highlight a word or write down a word. But if you can think about highlighting a word, it sticks out the next time you read the question.
Yeah, because when you're
Yeah.
reading through it, you're
Yep.
like needs more teaching, and you just highlight it as you're reading it. And then you can eliminate with those little cross things,
Mhm.
cross it off.
The other thing I think about, the other student brought up that those are excellent. Thank you very much. Hopefully that's helpful to the group. The other thing that I always say, and it's not on that review sheet, is if the question's long and wordy, read it once and then try and rephrase it into something that's easier for you. Like, for example, I was reviewing a question yesterday with a student, and it was about she goes into the home and to do something with the adult mother and notices that, oh, it was a parish nurse. The parish nurse visits the family and notices that the 3-year-old has bruises, and she verbalizes that the father husband hits her and hits the kid. Okay. So, and it asked what would be the most appropriate response. It was like, check it, talk to the pastor, report it, and there were 2 other ones. So I said to her, because her answer was, discuss this with the pastor. And I said, wait a minute. It doesn't even matter what kind of, she said, well, it's a parish nurse and, they usually talk to whatever. And I said, what's the most important thing? It doesn't matter if it was a parish nurse walking into the home, a hospice nurse, a school nurse, it doesn't matter. What was the issue? The issue was abuse. Does that make sense? It didn't matter. I mean, she answered, talk to the pastor. No, talk to your supervisor. No, it's abuse. You're suspecting abuse. That was the most important answer. So she could have eliminated half the question and just gone to the part where it said, the 3-year-old has bruises, the father hits them. That's all you needed to know. You could have eliminated the rest of the question. Make sense? Okay. All right. So those are my tips. Anybody have any other tips that they use? That's April. That's a big score. That's a good one.
One thing I do with questions is I'll go to the end where it poses what the question is, like whether it's what are you looking for, what are you teaching, I'll go to what the actual question is before I read the question as a whole. So I know what I'm looking for when I'm reading the question. And so that way I know going into the question exactly what it is I'm paying attention to.
Okay. That's a good strategy. Yeah. Anybody else have any strategies before we move to the study guide? Okay, good, good. Thanks for all your feedback. All right, let's get into the study guide. Okay. Can you guys see that? All right, cover sheet, same as every exam, just gives you what we're going to be covering. Okay. And this particular exam covers quite a bit. Okay. You guys know all what's on the cover sheet. We developed a study guide based on readings, based on PowerPoints, based on the exam, looking at the exam. So the study guide is a compilation of all of those resources. You have Cahoots, right? You have lots and lots of resources. Okay. The one thing that you should be familiar with in each chapter is your levels of prevention and your Healthy People 2030. Okay. If you do anything in the book, go back to those two boxes for that information. Okay. Because this course is guided. Much of this course is guided by Healthy People 2030 and what their national goals and objectives are for a healthy country. Okay. So best practice, review readings, project, discussion questions are a good review as well. If you missed a class, you definitely should have watched the recording for sure. If you were in class but missed part of class for whatever reason, you should go back and review that part of the recording. Okay. Even if it's 10, 15 minutes you missed, go back and review that. Okay. So the study guide, this is kind of a long one, and I'm not going to go through every bit of it, but it is broken out in sections of concepts we'll cover. So you have community assessment, you have evidence-based practice, disaster, economic influences. We try and label them like the chapters are labeled, using health information, government law, case management, violence and abuse. So these are all the topics we've covered over the last 3 weeks. Infectious disease, actually, I haven't covered week 8 yet. I'm covering that in class later on today. Infectious disease, surveillance outbreaks. Okay, so these are all the sections we have covered. Seems like a lot of information. It is. But here's how I encourage you to, since we've already put everything together into a study guide, start with the study guide. Okay. You should be going through each of these paragraphs. Okay. You should be, if you don't understand something on the study guide, highlight it. Okay. That's a concept, that's information that you need to go back to the chapter and look for. Okay. To try and get a better understanding. So for an example, each of these little bullets, when you read it, try and figure out 2 things. What information are you being provided? And what kind of question might you be asked? So for example, this is community refers to the dimensions of place, people, person, or place. There's 3 dimensions of community we look at. Place, people, person, and function. Okay. And then it gives you the information of what each one is. So when you measure the dimension of people, the community health nurse what access data sources. Okay, from census, tourist bureau, civic groups, okay? Well, and then measuring dimension of people. So it gives you a nice summary of how you measure the dimension of people. Okay. Dimension of place. How do we get information on the dimension of place? Would be measured with data sources, maps, newspapers, local housing. Okay. And then function. How do we measure function? Okay, that's at the end of the sentence. So libraries, police stations, welfare agencies, state departments would be all data sources of function. Okay, so try and break out each little paragraph. So if you get a question about this paragraph, what might it be? Maybe it's what factors go into measuring the dimensions of the community? What's the answer? Place, people, place, and function, right? Maybe it's going to give you a scenario of we're looking at the dimension of community, community with regards to function. Where would you get your data sources? It's right here: libraries, police stations, welfare agencies. Does that make sense? You have to break down the paragraph. What information are we giving, and what question might be derived from that? Okay, let's look at the next one. When completing a community assessment, I like to highlight. So pick out the important word. This paragraph, this bullet is talking about community assessment. Okay, what when nurse will include. Okay, so community assessment, and they're talking about systems categories found in every community. Okay, what are those systems categories? There's 5 of them right here. So you can eliminate a lot of fluff in these bullets. So we're doing a community assessment. This is asking about system categories. So maybe you get a select all that apply. What are the 5 system categories that we use in community assessment for every community? Well, politics, education, recreation, economics, and religion. Do you see how I'm going through these? Okay. Okay, we know the next one is asking about active versus partnerships in the community. Okay, so what's an active partner? What's a passive partner? It goes through and tells you what these are. So an example of an active partnership is a business that provides low-cost snacks to after-school programs. That's active. Okay, and we give an example here: a city creating a new park, a hospital providing a vaccination clinic, a rec center offering cooking classes. That's passive. Okay. So we know the next one is during a community assessment, the nurse is trying to perform, she's performing data gathering and data generation. So we know that the rest of this paragraph is going to be what's data gathering and what's data generation. So what kind of question might you get there? Maybe you're provided a scenario and you're asked, which is an example of data generation or data gathering? And then this last one in this section is a windshield. This is about a windshield survey, right? We know windshield survey is a method to collect data about the community by observing through a car or public transportation. And it talks about what a windshield survey is, how to do it. You see how I'm doing this? It's very overwhelming to just read line to line to line this entire study guide. You have to be able to pull out what each bullet is talking about, what information we've provided you, and what kind of question could be asked. All right. So we just went through the first section, and I've highlighted maybe a third of the information, right? This is a long study guide. This is the longest of the three. And so, you know, the goal isn't to read through this study guide and memorize it. We're at the point now where we're applying our knowledge, right? We've had all the classes prior to community. Okay, there's a reason that this class is positioned at the end of your program, right? All the concepts you should have learned in prior classes. Okay, med surge, maternity, peds, med surge 2 as you're learning now, fundamentals, foundations. Now it's time to take all that knowledge and take care of a patient in the community. So this class is the difference between taking care of a patient in a hospital versus taking care of a patient in the community. You know, what about you can take care of a COPD patient in the hospital and have all the resources around you. You have a respiratory therapist, you have a pulmonologist, you have doctors at the nurse's station. What happens when you take care of a COPD patient in the community? You're the only one you're walking into that home visit. Okay, so that's the difference. That's how we need to look. Whatever, that's my other mantra I always go over is, take off your hospital hat, take off your clinical hat, take off wherever you work. If you work in a clinic, a long-term care facility, a prison, wherever you work, you got to take off that hat and think of community. You are now on your own in the community, pulling all your skills from your previous classes, taking care of patients in the community. That's one part of your job. Okay, the other part is education. Okay, we have lots of different roles. So let's go to another section, disaster management. I'm going to ask you to do this for each section. Okay, disaster management. Okay, our first bullet is disasters are labeled as natural or man-made. What kind of question could that create?
Examples.
Yeah. What are the two kinds? I'm just throwing these out there. What are the two kinds of disasters? Natural or man-made. Okay. Maybe you have a scenario of there is an earthquake that struck Southern California, whatever. Is that an example of a natural or a man-made?
Natural.
Right. Right. So this first bullet tells me that you need to understand the difference. You need to understand, number one, there's two kinds of disasters, and you have to be able to give an example of each. Wherever we have a bullet that talks about, this should say Healthy People 2030. Wherever you have a bullet that talks about Healthy People 2030, that means that you should be very familiar with that Healthy People 2030 box in that chapter. Right? So disaster was chapter 16. Right? So this is asking, it's telling you that the objectives focus on disease mitigation, preparing, alerting, caring for disaster within a population. Right? One objective focuses on increasing the proportion of crisis and emergency messaging. home safety and safe driving. Number 2, access to recycling centers. Number 3. I don't know if that's the complete list, but I would go back and read that little box in chapter 16. Okay. This next one looks like it's talking about virulence. What is that? It's the ability to produce a severe pathological reaction. And then it explains a little bit more, bypassing the norm. So maybe it's a question about virulence, bypassing the normal immunological response, invades major organ systems, produces toxin. Okay. When teaching a family how to prepare for a disaster. Okay, so that's what this is about. How do we teach a family how to prepare for a disaster? Okay, I'm going to skip over some of this in here. Nurse should instruct the family to stock enough food for 3 days. That's number 1. Review the kit every 6 months. Number 2, ensure all members of the family know where the kit is located. Number 3, and learn how to turn off utilities in the house. Number 4. Okay. So what kind of question might you get from that?
Select all that apply.
About what? What's the question going to be?
The different aspects of teaching.
Yeah. What are you teaching families? What are the aspects? Exactly. Stock enough food for 3 days. So what if the question says stock enough? What if one of the answers says stock enough food for 6 days? It's not the correct answer. Review the kit every year. Nope, that's not the correct answer. So you get 4 specific things that you're going to teach the family.
Would we make sure that that's not expired too? That last sentence? Expired.
Well, they just tell you they're just telling you reviewing it every 6 months just verifies that there's no expired items. We already know we have to review it every 6 months. That's just telling you why. Okay. Next is the purpose of mass casualty exercise. So we need to know what the purpose of a mass casualty exercise is. What's that all about? Well, it's to evaluate the agency's response and capabilities. Simple. So let's say you have a question about disaster management and it's talking about mass casualty exercises. Why do you do them? Well, you do them to evaluate the agency's response and validate capabilities. And then the rest of this just explains why. The priority outcome to evaluate would be the amount of time it would take for EMS to be activated. And it explains that early response can decrease casualties. Yeah. Pretty simple. Okay. When a federal emergency has been declared, the National Response Framework provides specific needs to the community. So this is about what governmental agency helps out when there's been a federal emergency. What's the answer? National Response Framework, not the CDC, not the Department of Homeland Security. Well, they're under that, but not the WHO. Who responds? National Framework, National Response Framework. Then it goes further. It says the role. What's the role of the NRF? And it gives you very specific things that they help the community with, right? Transportation, temporary housing, medical resources, search and rescue, and firefighting. So maybe you get a question that says, what does the NRF do? We know that there's two potential questions. Who responds? What's the agency that responds? Would be NRF. But maybe another question is the NRF is responding to a community in a disaster. What kinds of services do they provide? Transportation, temporary housing, medical resources, search and rescue, and firefighting. Do you get how I'm doing this? Is this helpful?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So you should be doing it using health, which is another one that I want to go over. Let's do violence and abuse, right? We know that primary prevention, what's that? What's primary?
Preventing.
Okay,
Like,
so we're talking about violence and human abuse. We're trying to educate before it happens, right? So the risks, risks of violence, risks of human abuse. So we know that violence and abuse, primary prevention begins with the community, right? And so if you're thinking primary prevention, you're thinking trying to prevent things before they happen. So this is talking about incorporating strategy. Who do you have to work with, right? Well, it says primary prevention begins with a community approach. So besides you, who needs to be involved if you're going to do a primary approach? Who needs to be involved? Criminal justice, education, social services, community advocacy, and public health. Okay, so we're talking about primary prevention, prevent it before it happens. It's a team effort. It's a community approach. Who should be at your table? Who should have a seat at that table trying to come up with a community approach? It is suggested that it's criminal justice people, education people, social service people, community advocacy people, and public health. Okay. Some communities have used the following. So here's some examples of primary prevention strategies that communities have used. So different questions that might come out of this. What are some different questions that might come out of this?
Maybe asking who all is involved with the primary prevention of abuse in the community. Yep,
and who needs a seat at the table to help with those primary prevention strategies? There's your examples. Another question could be based on what are some strategies that communities have used, right? And here they are. Teach children and youth how to cope with anger and stress. Family programs that teach parents how to deal with their children more effectively. Preschool programs that develop intellectual and social skills. Public education programs. So here's 5 examples of primary prevention. So that potentially is a question. I don't know, select all that apply. I'm just throwing this out there. What strategies have communities used in primary prevention for violence? Select all that apply. Right? Or who needs a seat at the table for primary prevention in a community? All right. So I just want you to read each topic through and think of, okay, what are they giving me? What are they going to ask? So under HIV, infection, hepatitis, TB, STDs, here's STDs. Okay, we know it's a major public health challenge. We know that, well, there's a lot of information in here. Number one, contact tracing should be started as a secondary prevention. Why is that secondary? Contact tracing.
Because it's already happened and they're trying to
Well, we're
to
trying to screen, right?
screen, right?
Right. We're trying to screen. Contact tracing is secondary. Here's some more information. Bacterial infections for STDs there's 3 of them: bacterial, gonorrhea, syphilis, and chlamydia. Another part of it, right? And then it gives you an example of tertiary prevention for most of these infections are antibiotics. Okay. In contrast, so now it's viral. So this is talking about bacterial versus viral. STDs caused by viruses cannot be cured. Okay, so that's the second part of this. Okay, so bacteria goes through bacterial infections. What are they? Treated with antibiotics. What about the ones that are viral? They cannot be cured. So what happens? They're chronic diseases that lead to a lifetime of symptom management and infection control. Okay, so there's your difference between bacterial and viral. And then there's some additional information. Syphilis can be transmitted transplacentally. What does that mean? Mom to baby. Right? So specifically, we're pointing out that syphilis is transmitted transplacentally, and if untreated, leads to serious problems. And it further says that untreated syphilis can cause premature stillbirth, blindness, deafness, facial abnormalities, disability, or death. So that's a real loaded bullet. Lots of different things can come out of that, right? What kind of I'm just throwing them out there. What kind of STDs might we see? Bacterial, viral. Bacterial, is it treated? How? Viral, is it treated? How? Not. Right? What are some examples of bacterial STDs? Well, gonorrhea, syphilis, chlamydia. Okay. And then we mentioned specifically syphilis being a transplacental transmission. And then the last part of that is untreated syphilis can cause numerous problems in babies. What are they? So I can come up with 4 or 5 questions from that, but that's how I want you to think about it. Okay. All righty. So tell me what you're thinking. Helpful to go through it like this?
Yep.
What information are we giving you? Or what information is presented in the study guide? What might they be asking? Okay, so that's how I would suggest that you tackle the study guide. Otherwise, it's going to get overwhelming. It's a long study guide. It's very wordy, and you need to be able to hone in on what the topics are that are on the study guide and what supporting documentation you have in that bullet. What are they asking about? Think about what questions. Okay. Questions. Make sure everybody has their name in there. Jackie, what are we doing? Naming.
The name
Name
and
and
your
Name and
Professor.
professor. Name and professor. So, thanks for coming, you guys. if you have any questions, let me know. I'll stay on. I have to go to another at-risk meeting in about 10 minutes here. So, but I want to give you a feel for, that's how I would suggest you tackle the study guide. If there's anything on there, if you come to a certain section and it's just not clicking, your due diligence would be to go back to the book, go back to your notes, maybe go back to the recording of when it was provided, that in what week the information was provided, okay? And try and read more, do some more research, maybe look up some words if it's terminology that you don't understand. And if you're still not getting it, that's when you need to reach out to your professor. You know, make a big X in the left-hand side of that part of the study guide. I don't get it. That X means I don't get it. I've tried everything. I've done my due diligence, but I still don't understand. That's when you reach out to your professor and say, I want to meet before the exam to go over a couple of parts of the study guide that I don't understand. Okay? That's my suggestion. Any questions? I hope everybody has a really wonderful Thanksgiving, and you can maybe try and take a little bit of time off tomorrow. I'm trying to carve out a little bit of time tomorrow to just unwind. I know you guys are busy. I know you guys are busy. I say this all the time. Your schedules, trying to balance your school and your personal life and your work. I acknowledge 100% how busy you guys are. Just try to make it a little bit easier during these reviews of how to really use your study guide in a effective way versus just reading through line by line by line. Remember, this is about application. You should already have the knowledge. Now we have to apply it. Just think about walking into a home by yourself, doing a home visit in the community. How would you deal with it? How would you manage it with just you by yourself versus having that client in a hospital? Okay.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank
All
you,
right. So
Professor.
happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks, you too.
Yep. Make sure everybody's name is in the
Thank you.
chat, and then I will send this recording to all the professors. So if you have teammates that you think would benefit from listening to the recording, just let them know. All the professors will have them in a couple hours. Okay, as soon as it converts for me. Oh, we'll probably later today because I have to teach a class in a couple hours. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
All right.
you.
Bye. Bye. Erica, you there?